We are here with Evan Kidd, writer, director, producer, man about town, independent filmmaker, podcaster. He does all these wonderful things. And so, Evan, thank you so much for joining us today. We're glad to have you here. And I like to do in the beginning a little bit of an origin story. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, your upbringing, where you came from, what got you into movies, and we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, well, as you said, my name is Evan Kidd. I am an indie filmmaker coming from Raleigh, North Carolina. Just really stubbornly independent, I guess is the best way I could describe myself. I'm making movies. Yeah, I'm making movies out here in NC. It's not Hollywood, it's not New York, but hey, somehow I'm making it work. And I think I'm pretty lucky to be, in the age we're in, that I am able to do this, because I'd like to think if I was born 20, 30 years earlier, maybe I wouldn't have gotten into this. Maybe I would have done a day job and gotten into this later. Who knows? I mean, I think it's weird, this strange time we're all able to kind of just make YouTube and make videos galore from wherever we are and kind of just DIY it. But yeah, that's kind of my origin story. I always took the family VHS camera as a kid and was making little silly movies with friends, pets, just anyone I could put in front of the
you don't have to pay the pets as much.
Yeah, they don't need the SAG card or anything.
They'll work. Yeah, they'll work for food. They'll work for meals.
Yeah. Exactly. And it was just a lot of that. And, eventually I kind of started finding narratives and structures in some of those videos as I got older. Then I eventually went to film school at East Carolina University. Okay. And just kind of, again, that very similar DIY work ethic was kind of installed in me there. It wasn't NYU, it wasn't like a big fancy program. A lot of it was kind of independent study by nature. But I do think it kind of helped shape me into the way I operate now.
That's great. So are you from North Carolina originally then?
Yeah, I'm from Raleigh.
I love talking to filmmakers that are not based in New York or Los Angeles, because I'm from New York and I am currently based in Los Angeles. And I've been out in LA now. I mean, it's no secret. I've mentioned it on the show before. I've been out in LA now for 20 years exactly. I moved out here in 99 from New York City. And I am fascinated by people that choose not to come to one of the two big, or even Chicago or any of the big, media hubs in the country. What made you want to stay in North Carolina right now during this time to work on your career?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because when I was in film school, my plan was very much to just shoot off to LA like everyone else and just kind of just do it there. And, I've screened films at film festivals in both New York and LA. I love both cities, great towns, great food. There's so much more infrastructure by nature there. Right. And I think that's obviously by design. And it, I won't say it makes it any easier one way or the other, but I do think that if you are looking to, be an AD, there's a route for that. There's a route for getting into DGA. It may take a lot of years and time and effort, blood, sweat, tears, as does the indie route. But there's a little bit more of an established path for you. And, I think my thing was, I realized very early on after film school, I did a lot of crew gigs. I lived in Louisiana for a bit, which is a big production hub in New Orleans. So I was doing some crew stuff, and I kind of eventually realized that crew stuff was great, but I realized if I wanted to make my own scripts, it would take way too long to go through the PA route and try to go that way. So the more I got into it, the more I realized, hey, I need to just go ahead and start going and making and doing. And then I kind of realized that was kind of tough to do in more established towns. You have to get a lot more permits, you have to do a lot more things. And if you do it kind of outside the system, there's not really any rules. And so you kind of have to create them. Yeah.
It's a bit of a dichotomy to me, and that's kind of why one of the things I was really interested in talking to you about, in addition to the subject matter of the film itself, because I'm starting to find, and I guess a lot of this is being kind of out of work in Los Angeles for the past few months. I'm usually, when I'm not trying to get my own projects off the ground, I'm an editor and a post supervisor. I'm involved in post production. And if there's no productions, there's no post productions. So once all that, stuff kind of dried up, it didn't kind of really matter where you are. The work was kind of gone. Specifically speaking about mental health, that's really fascinating to me right now is, let's take you as an example, since we are speaking to you. When you are in Raleigh, when you're working in Raleigh and you're making a feature film for a couple $100, that is incredibly creatively freeing. You can work on your own schedule. You can work within your own budget. I think you said the picture, I don't think it's a secret, has cost only a few $100. You can make a feature film in North Carolina for a few $100, have that freedom, don't really have to answer to anyone. But Now you're doing it all yourself, and the weight that it must take to be like, I need to edit this thing, I need to produce this, I need to do, and people are counting on me because I have a cast that are helping me out. It's incredibly mentally, spiritually freeing to work in such a micro budget space that we do, but yet it also kind of adds so much other baggage that you have to deal with that might stress you out during the production of any movie. Can you talk to me a little bit more about your own personal experience, how happy you must be to not have to answer to anyone while you're working on Panda Barrett, but yet still now you have to handle all those logistics yourself and what that must do to your stress level? Talk to me a little bit about that dichotomy, if you will.
It's absolutely a dichotomy. And it's interesting you mentioned that because, as much as I champion DIY indie filmmaking, I would love to see more of it. I don't think it's for everyone. I do think you have to be a very specific type of person, and you have to have a very specific type of, work ethic, life balance, understanding of what you can and cannot handle. And I'm not even going to say I'm 100% there. It's always a learning process.
Right.
And specifically with Panda Barrett, I mean, like you mentioned, we shot the picture for a couple $100, and, there was a crew of maybe 3, and there were 1 or 2 days where I had the, and it was mostly volunteer, and one of the boom operators couldn't make it. So we had the actress playing the panda help us out on boom, which, I kind of showed her a quick crash course. And then I was also the DP. There was so much going on. And when I tell people that, they're pretty surprised. And, I'm not going to toot my own horn too much. I'm competent enough with a little bit of everything just by came up doing weddings and freelancing and just kind of that, that whole rub, just so you understand the gear. It's nothing scary to me. It's just a lot to keep up with at once.
Right.
And like you mentioned, you do have to check in with yourself and check in with those stress levels and make sure it's not too much. And, for a while, I think when you first kind of open the Pandora's box, if you will, that is indie filmmaking, DIY filmmaking, it's almost too freeing because you realize you're like, oh, I could be doing this every month. I could be doing that. And then you kind of come to realize, or at least I have, that it's not sustainable in that capacity. I think if there were a bunch of people helping me and we had like an organized company with this, that, and the third set up to do that, we could. But also, I think just me as one guy, that's too much to put on myself because I also have a family and I have my jobs I work and I have other things I do to make money. And it's all a juggling act. And sometimes the stars align to be able to do, a weirdo indie movie every once in a while. And I think I've gotten better at managing it, but it's always a balancing act.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this then, because, and it was one of the things I was curious about. It goes a little bit with being in North Carolina, but just more about, micro budget filmmaker, and especially releasing your movie like right now on Amazon in the middle of all of this and trying to what we call monetize the whole thing. Yeah. When you were starting up on the production of Panda Barrett, or even, Run of the Picture, that was the name of the short doc that you had. When you're putting these together, are you doing it specifically as you want to make money from the movie, or do you have another like day job that you put into practice to support yourself? Because that's, again, one of the other stresses of being a micro budget filmmaker and trying to make a career out of what we're doing is knowing how little Amazon pays its filmmakers. You're not paying your rent. You're not paying your mortgage with an Amazon check. So do you have a day job that you use to supplement? And how do you balance what you want to do that doesn't necessarily pay anything versus what you have to do to support your family? And how do you balance those things out?
Yeah. Like we talk about work-life balance, for a while, I just, I come from the freelance video world. So for me, it's always yes. I always say yes to work typically.
Right.
And it's only very recently that I've started kind of getting that into a workable area. And, I've been fortunate because there are steady gigs that I have and jobs I work and things I do in tandem that took several years to kind of get into where they are now that allow me to supplement my films with that to make my living and pay the bills and just do all those things. And it's, it's a little bit of a dance because you can't do too much of the film thing or else you're not able to do the other stuff Because right now I'm paying for the bulk of the film stuff. There's no
Right.
financiers, there's no generous people writing checks to make these happen. It's really me. And, I always want to make sure we have the bare minimum to go. I don't always have payrolls set up for everyone, but, I want to make sure people can, put gas in their tank, be fed, just the very bare minimum, which is like, it is so bare minimum. But when you're asking people to work long hours and stuff like that, you just want to make sure they feel taken care of while they're there. So yeah, that has always been something I've wrestled with and struggled with. And I think I very much realized early on that, I made my first film, Son of Clowns, in 2015, right after film school when I was 22 years old. And, it's been, almost like 5-6 years since then. And, I've learned enough in the time since to realize you don't just make one movie. And, that's the rocket ship that takes you to Mars. I mean,
right.
It's like a very slow burn. And I think I've realized I'm going to be making incremental steps for many, many years. And I may never see this grand Hollywood vision of success. And that's fine. I actually kind of don't expect to. If I do, maybe that's great. What I'm more interested in is just doing the work. I don't right now like to think too much about the future because, as we know, based on everything that happened this year, you literally cannot plan for it. You can try to be as responsible as you can be, and obviously do that. I don't think there's ever 100% certain path to take. So I think for me, it's taken a lot of like thought and meditation and just really being present and understanding that making Panda Barrett is about making Panda Barrett. It's not about going to a big film festival like Sundance or South by. It's not about getting distribution. It's just about making the film. And obviously, those are all things I would love to do, whether it's with Panda or something else. But I've found a way now to, just release work pretty steadily, at least a film a year, and get it out there on Amazon. So at least it has a pretty wide platform. And while it's not making me a ton of coin, I understand that people are connecting with the work and that people are slowly but surely kind of coming into an audience for me. And so, I think with a lot of time that may pay off in the future, but I don't think too much about it. It's like kind of strange. I know you should.
Right. And that's actually, that kind of leads me to my next question. Cause like you should, I want to talk a little bit about that process. And you spoke a little bit about meditation and stuff like that. And I want to talk about that process. Cause I think I'm also a little bit further. I consider myself mid-career. I'm 45. I'm not done yet. I've only directed one feature. I never really considered myself a filmmaker, only in that I never really wanted to direct. I kind of fell into it when I was making my documentary. It was about my family. Who else is going to direct it but me, like that. And I didn't even go to film school like 20 years ago. I took a short little program at NYU, but it was like in their School of Continuing Education. So it's not like I got juiced into like that whole NYU thing or anything like that. I'm with you 100%. Like everyone's going to have their own path to take. And no matter what road you think you're going down, there will be all sorts of shortcuts and twists and turns that come up along the way. But let me ask, since I think you're kind of not early in your career, but like you've had enough time to think about it. So you started in film school, and they don't, maybe they did where you are, you can correct me if I'm wrong. They don't usually teach you how to build your career in film school. They'll teach you about, cinema studies and theory and film theory and how to use equipment and how to do things, but they don't really prepare you for, we're going to pick you up at a film school and drop you right into New York or LA, go to it. Can you talk a little bit about your process from, at least when I was in, the little side film school that I went to, most people start off thinking that like, yes, they're going to leave film school, go make a shorter feature, go make another one, somebody else will pay for it. And like, that's the typical path. When did you start to realize that like, it wasn't going to necessarily be that way, that you're going to have to push forward your own work and it's not necessarily going to be the work? Let me see if I'm wording this the right way. It's not like the work is actually the commercial for you, is how I'm starting to think about it. Like the movie is a commercial for you to get future work or to practice and build your skills. So each next project is progressively better than the next. And then eventually, hopefully somebody will pay you money to do one someday. But talk to me about your process, your mental process from leaving film school to now, and how you kind of came to a piece of knowing, when I say like an inner peace to know that like it's not necessarily going to be the story, the fairy tale ending, and that you have to make your own path and come to peace with that.
If you've made a film, what you just said will resonate, because I think you have to do it once, and that's how it worked out for me. Maybe buying into the kind of illusion of, hey, you make a film, you get into this, everything else is so much easier. What they don't tell you, like you said, is that that's really just opening the door.
Right.
There's a long corridor afterwards. And, you know, that's what I've slowly started to figure out. And again, I really don't have this 100% figured out. Every day is a learning process. But I do think where I was as a filmmaker, as a person, after I made Son of Clowns, I was expecting one thing. And I won't say I was blindsided. You know, I'd never expected a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Right.
But, you know, I guess like I just got so into there's that feeling when you're making your first feature and you're doing it yourself and you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears, and, you know, you're not really sleeping a whole lot. You're not really eating a whole lot, and you're just very consumed by the process. And it's sort of necessary, but it's not sustainable. And I think what I've realized is, like, after making that first film and, you know, doing the film fest circuit for a year, you know, I flew to screenings that had a bunch of people. I flew to other screenings that they forgot to play the film. I mean, it was like, it ran the gamut, and it was such a whirlwind, but a necessary learning experience that is almost like equally as valuable as film school was, because it was just the path of resistance that kind of, you know, almost School of Hard Knocks teaches you what you need to know. After making Son of Clowns, I realized, okay, this is not going to be happening right away, and that's fine. And I think I had to make a decision at that point and be really honest and vulnerable with myself and tell myself, do I really want to do this for the long term, or do I really want to do this to, you know, be famous or to be verified or to do this or do that? And just buying into that mythos and that world. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I don't want people to think like I'm this like anti-everything hipster or something. Like, I'm really not. Like, you know, if you gave me a check to go direct Star Wars, I'd say, when do we start? I mean,
right.
I'm not like that. It's just, I'm also like almost too realistic at this point, you know, still positive that I can make movies, but I think I'm understanding the types of movies that I can make right now are really special, because if I was doing crazy big movies and blockbusters, I wouldn't ever probably go back. And so I'd like to think that while there are more filmmakers out there, I think that the ones that stick with it in the long term are going to have really interesting careers and trajectories. I'm very excited for the next 10 years of films that people are going to make independently, because I think we're going to be getting work that's just going to be different. It's going to be weird. It's going to be people discovering themselves from whatever corner of the earth they're doing their thing.
Sure. Well, the world has certainly changed a lot this year, so everyone's gonna kind of have to force to adapt to new markets, new everything.
Absolutely.
So when you realized, or came to the realization that this was going to be a longer haul in terms of a sustainable career, was it one or two specific things that happened? And I'll frame it this way, because I'm not afraid to admit there is certainly a part of me that wants to be famous. And I don't necessarily know why. Like, if someone was said, like, why do you want to be, like, I can't explain it. Like, being noticed in a restaurant is cool. Like, that's part of it. Like, I want to be noticed, but like, it doesn't really have anything to do with the work itself. Did you have a specific incident that happened where you're like, I thought this was going to be much faster, but it's going to be a much longer haul, and I need to decide, like, you had a decision to make. Do I want to keep doing this and try to pursue this as a profession, or do I want it to just be a hobby that I'm doing whenever? Like,
I think for me, it was that screening. It was in Los Angeles. It was the screening, and I won't name the festival just because it was, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but it was the one I went to where they forgot the film. And it was a very humbling experience, because I took this crazy redirected flight that took like 12 hours to get there. It was just one of those days where the airport was just like a dumpster fire, and you were exhausted. And I made the mistake of like traveling instead of like celebrating my birthday that day with folks. And so it was like my birthday, and I was like just feeling all weird about it. And when I got there, some of my friends in LA came out, and I was like kind of bummed that the screening wasn't there. And they were like, no, you just go ask them. Just go ask them. And I was like, yeah. So I just went and asked them, and they like eventually got their stuff together and sent a tech, and like just me and my friends watched the movie, and it was great. And that's when I kind of realized like it was funny. I laughed. Like, I mean, the movie has funny moments, but just the situation, like going there, and it was like one of my first times screening in LA, and I just had this like thing built up in my head. I was like, maybe this is the start of something. You know, you just tell yourself these things, and it's okay to be excited. It's part of life. I mean, you need to be excited about things. That screening kind of humbled me in a way, and I won't say it's like the inciting incident of everything, but I think it was that with just, you know, a year of like marketing and promoting, and you know, it's weird, like you mentioned, trying to be famous. Like I think every, you know, artist, whether they want to be famous, like for me, it's like I don't really feel the need to, you know, I'm very personable. Like if someone wants to talk to me in a restaurant, I'll talk their ear off. But, you know, it's like I don't really need the spotlight, but I would like people to hear what I have to say, because I do think, you know, whether it sounds weird or not, like that's a goal for me. Like when I make a film,
it validates the work.
I mean, you know,
it validates the work that someone's paying attention to it.
Yeah. And like I make it, you know, partially to get something out of my system, but I also make it for other people to hopefully experience. And I mean, I don't think that's a shock to anyone, you know, but it is part of it. And so I think I've realized just, you know, through weird experiences like that, it's okay to have a weird, you know, stumble, if you will, along your journey. Like, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your film if the festival forgets it. Like, I remember I was like, I wonder if they just hated it. I wonder if that was like a
we hated it enough to program it and then forget
and it was like
about
in the program. And I was like, what? And there was this like one guy I remember who like wanted to see it, who I had no idea who he was, because it was like me and my friends and this one dude, and then like he was just waiting for it, and I was like, man, bless this guy, because
I know, right?
He was just sitting in the theater waiting, and like nothing happened. But you know, and again, it comes back to that, like if there's one person that wants to see it, I'll do the Kevin Smith, and I'll talk for an hour to that one person, you know?
Right, sure. Listen, my friends have seen my movie before. I want strangers to see it. I want, you know, people to see the thing. I love your whole mindset. It's very different from mine. I'm, again, being 45 and originally from New York. I'm a bitter, angry, neurotic New York Jewish guy. So, like, if I got to a film festival and that had happened to me, I'd be flipping my lid. I love that you can laugh at a situation like that and make lemons from lemonade or lemonade from lemons and all of that. But I'd be like, what the
I mean, I can laugh
guys?
Now. I'll put it that way.
All right.
I mean, like, I wasn't quite as rosy then.
Sure. So, well, and again, that led me to, you know, want to ask you about the meditation stuff, because I'm curious. I'm hearing more from people about what they do to minimize their stress. And I've been trying to find, I'm not really a mantras guy. My wife is one of those people. She's a very external person. She needs like the quotes and the memes and the motivation to come from outside to push her to do stuff. And I'm more of an internal guy. Like I need to push myself to, like I said, sometimes just to get out of bed. And so I'm looking for ways, I'm trying to learn about how other filmmakers deal with reducing their stress. And so when you said meditation, it jumped out at me, because I don't usually, like I said, I'm not a mantras guy. Have you been doing that for a long time? Did you discover that along the way since film school? What do you work into your usual routine while you're working to minimize your stress and to calm you down when you're trying to teach your lead actress how to hold a boom mic?
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think part of it helps that I am very type B, and I think a lot of times it comes across like I'm either disinterested or I don't care, but I think it is that, I don't even know how to explain it, like just a laid back understanding that, you know, life is serious, but it's also not. When I'm making a movie, it can feel very elevated. It almost feels like a fight or flight. It's like, you know, especially indies, right? So I paid this farm to let us film there. And then it's like, oh, we have 5 hours. Go, rush, get as much done as possible. Oh, there's a horse in the shot neighing. We have to redo that. Like, it's just weird things like that will happen. And obviously that will elevate your stress. And obviously, like when I'm pasture. I can't really stop the crew and sit down and meditate. I mean, as cool as that would be. So I think it's also just like understanding what works when and how to execute. And, you know, for me, there's a lot of behind the scenes work mentally. And, you know, I try to prepare myself days before I have a shoot. That way, you know, I kind of anticipate, you know, something's always going to fall through the cracks on a production day. We know this as filmmakers. This just is kind of Murphy's Law. And, you know, it doesn't make it suck any less. And I still fume internally a lot, you know, and sometimes externally, you know, and it's just like finding out, I think it helps when you have cast and crew who are very on the same page as you. And I think that's the thing I learned doing both the you know, bigger TV shows when I was crew and a PA. I've done camera on some reality shows, you know, stuff like that. But I've also done more recently and much more often my own stuff. And I realized, you know, my stuff is indie. I know it's not putting a ton of money on the table for anyone. So I understand there's not that like push for, you know, a stress and making a day and making a schedule. But I think it's just the people on the reality shows, you know, they're there to get paid. They're there to do one thing, more or less. I mean, maybe they enjoy some parts of film, I'm sure, but there was just a lot of like folks that were like, hey, I'm just here to make the day. I'm going home. You know, with the indie stuff, I find there's just a little more of connection with the source material and the message. So I try to, you know, surround myself with good people. I feel like I'm rambling, but
no, that's all. Like I said, it's all very good to hear, because I think everyone, and what actually was very interesting to hear is that you would describe yourselves as type B, because directors, I think, generally speaking, are very type A personalities.
Yeah.
They want to, I mean, there's a reason why we call it a director. They want to direct. They want to run the show. They want to have control over just about everything that's within the frame of the camera, which makes sense. That's what the whole, you know, that's what the job is. So I think having a type B personality in this kind of instance would be a great asset to a director, because you can just better go with the flow and figure out, especially for me, like I said, I don't consider myself specifically type A, but, you know, I'm a very high stress guy. And, you know, if you're trying to make your day and you're not chilling anyone out when you're like, we have to make our day. Let's go. Come on, chop. Like, that doesn't really chill anyone out. So, and people will, on any set, will always look to the director to steer the ship, not just what's, you know, in front of the camera, but it's their job to shepherd the whole crew. And of course, you know, a bigger studio picture, someone's like, you know, a grip is going to work. They wake up, they go to work, they punch their, you know, their time card and they go home. For a lot of people, it's a job, but for creators like us, creative people like us, like you said, a little more connection to the source material, it becomes a little more important, and that kind of elevates the stakes. So, but you were saying that you kind of prepare a few days beforehand to, you know, mitigate that stress that you'll be dealing with on set. Anything specific? Like, do you do writing? Like, what, like, do you lock yourself in a quiet room and say some ohms and just kind of center yourself? What's your personal process for getting yourself level-headed before you start on a production, so you can, like I said, put that vibe out to your whole crew so they don't feel the stress that someone like me would be bringing to a set?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can bring some stress, and I have and will in the future.
And that's not to say that like it's 100% we're perfect at, like, you know, being, you know, Mr. Cool on set. Like, it's always gonna be that
it's
way.
funny that you mentioned that. So when you said that, it made me think. So one of the locations in Panda Barrett is the character the grandma's house, and it was actually my brother's house in Raleigh. And he's not in film. He's, you know, like a business guy. You know, he let us film in the house, and he was just kind of observing what was happening from afar. And I remember he like pulled me aside after it was all done, and he was like, that is like a side of you that I have never seen before. Like, that is wild to me.
From your brother.
And,
who's like, known you, I'm assuming, your entire life.
Right. Yeah. And that's what was interesting. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, well, no, like, you're yourself. But he's like, you like are able to like switch between like, all right, we need to get this done, and also like friendly when there's an actor struggling with the scene and trying to get in the headspace. Like, and I'm not like, again, I'm not saying I have something mastered down, because to me, I don't think about it, but it did make me think about that comment he told me. And I think what it is just kind of that preparation. And for me, what that looks like is, you know, I'm not super new agey. You know, I do try to meditate. I try to think like, what is the intention of me doing this project? So like, you know, I'm not really like too ethereal about it, but I'm, you know, I think, why am I going to my brother's house to film this? Why do we have to be there? And then I think, okay, he's letting me be there. That's really cool. That's really nice of him. Then I think, wow, the cast and crew took their time to do this for free. Oh, that's cool too. And then I always connect to the source material. That's kind of like my last thing I do, which for Panda Barrett was very into mental health. It's very present as a character in the project. And it is very based on a lot of stuff that my lead actor, Camus Leonardo, went through in life. It's not exactly one for one, but, there's a lot of stuff that he talked to me about and was vulnerable about. And I was like, man, like this is a way for him to kind of go through something and talk about something, and me as well. And, other folks. And so I think I kind of connect to that intention. So that way, when I run out of batteries on something, which happened, or I fill a hard drive and have to drive 45 minutes back to my house and get another one, which also happened. When those things go off, yes, it's annoying. Yes, I kind of want to punch a pillow, but at the end of the day,
a pillow if you're lucky,
right? Oh yeah. Otherwise, it's like I got to set up a punching bag in the garage and put out a healthy.
Why does my bedroom have holes in the wall? Don't worry.
Yeah, it's like, but it's that kind of thing. And it's like just telling yourself, okay, when that happens, it will work itself out. Hey, we're going to be here another hour. Want to let y'all know. I told my cast and my crew when that happened, and I was like, there's no PA. I'm going to have to go drive across town and get this hard drive. Right. And everyone's just waiting for me. And I felt like an idiot. And I was like, it was supposed to be in the bag, but it wasn't. But, again, I work other jobs. I have a family. I do other things. And I was like, hey, I am usually very prepared, but everything once in a while will slip. And you just kind of tell yourself, here's a pizza. Turn on the game. I
was going to say, I'll be
back in an hour. Here's a beer.
I was going to say, how do you get them to remain calm in, your whole cast and crew to remain calm in the face of you having to do that? Giving them a pizza will help.
Yes. It helps settle everyone. Everyone was also just super nicer than they needed to be. And,
that always
and again,
helps too.
Yeah, and that helps a lot. And again, that's just a very like weird piece of anecdotal evidence that just happened on the set and a specific thing. But I think it's just for larger things, for anything that can go wrong, just sort of embrace it and connect back to your original intention of why you're doing this.
Right.
And then it won't matter.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's absolutely, it's something that I need to practice more as well. And I like the way you described it about being intentional and remembering why we're doing this.
Yes.
Like if you're doing it to get famous, of course you're going to flip your lid if something doesn't go exactly the way you envision it, because that's all your end goal. But if your end goal is just to, have people see your stuff or something other than, like I need to cash a check or be famous or something esoteric like that, it's easier to just kind of let things roll off your back. And it's always, we're never going to be 100% there. It's always a work in progress and trying to, just always be a better person.
100%.
Just be a good person.
Yeah.
So, well, let me ask you a little bit about the movie then, because it is in the world of mental health and things like that. Did you write it with your lead together, or is it his script? Is it your script? Who wrote it originally first?
Funny story about the film. Originally, we were going to make a music video. There was no movie. And it was for one of his songs. And we were joking. And I was like, what if because, just a lot of times you need a visual gimmick for a music video. You need something just eye catching.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, today's YouTube culture and, people are going to be like, what will catch their eye? And I was like, a panda bear in a mascot costume. And I said it half joking. And Camus was like, oh, 100%, we should do that. And I was like, you think so? He's like, yeah, we should. I was like, I was kind of joking, but sure. Yeah. And that was originally all it was just going to be throwing that in a music video. It was funny because I was also getting to know him just as a person while we were planning this music video. And we kept meeting at this coffee shop, after we both got off work, and we were talking. And eventually I kind of was like, man, you've been through some stuff. And we were talking a lot about mental health, how we've both dealt with depression and anxiety. He had recently lost his mother, and he was talking about that as well. Just this big amalgamation of things. And I was like, I've had this script idea for a while and it wasn't really even connected to the panda or anything like that, but it was about a guy dealing with grief. And it was just super loose, just a bunch of, scribbles and notes. It wasn't really more than an outline. I was like, would you be interested in acting? Because I think this story is a little more interesting to me than the music video right now. And he was like, yeah. So we talked about it. I went and wrote a script in a few weeks and gave it to him. And he was like, let's do it. And it was, loosely based on conversations. Like, it wasn't a 1-to-1. There was no like girlfriend who died or anything like the premise of the film. We used the vehicle that is grief and dealing with stuff and loss, which is the most human thing everyone deals with. And it's like so weird. Like, when we made this film, we had no way of knowing what was going to happen this year. With COVID and just
and you started shooting it long before any
fall 2019. It was wrapped this time last year, and I had been editing until about June, so I was like editing as the pandemic was happening. So it was really just strange in that way. But I remember just editing, thinking like, there's so many themes in here that were obviously relevant before, but just more so now, and how people are dealing with like low grade depression that kind of lingers in the background. Because I think a lot of times like movies tend to over dramatize how depression is depicted.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of times it's, crying and throwing your arms up and just laying on the floor. And like, this is like what happens when you go to work and you forget that you left something on, and it's like kind of sad, but also like kind of funny. Like, it's like these weird human moments. Like, the film kind of balances the drama and the comedy. And while it's certainly more dramatic, it's just kind of finding that nuance that, like, even when horrible things happen, as the world is operating now, it's kind of like half open, half closed. Like, people still got to go to work. You still got to put yourself in precarious positions sometimes. And just kind of like what that does to people's minds. So yeah, that was kind of the long and short of it. Probably more long, but
so when the project was kind of born, the topic of mental health wasn't really like your driving factor for creating the script. It just kind of grew out of your organic conversations with cast.
As we got to know one another and talked about our own depictions and dealings with mental health, and just kind of like what we saw in the media and the movies that just didn't really feel real a lot of times.
I haven't had any conversations with any filmmakers on the show about this specifically, but it's been on my mind lately as I am in therapy. I see my therapist usually bi-weekly, but as things have just been getting more and more crazy, I've kind of spaced them out more, because for me, doing my therapy sessions with my therapist is almost kind of a reminder of how fucked up the world is right now. So I kind of want to like space them out so I can like feel normal, if that makes sense. But the one thing I've kind of been thinking about lately is mental health depictions in, film and pop culture. And like you were saying, it's just the nature of drama. It's just the nature of what film and theater and dramatic works of art is you have to distill it into, a concentrated ball of an hour and a half. Or however, or a short film or whatever. You have to just jam pack all these mental health topics into a thing, and trying to do something real just by virtue of making a filmed project out of it. It's now no longer real. It becomes a caricature of what, like you said, just leaving on the coffee pot can drive someone crazy for the whole day. And I don't even like usually using the term crazy, because this is mental health and we're not, that doesn't mean you're crazy, so I use it euphemistically. But, like that's what most people have to deal with is, I left the coffee pot on and it's going to, drive me bonkers all day. And how do you really show how that's affected someone throughout the whole day in a 1-minute scene? You gotta jam pack it all in there. So I'm curious to hear from you, and again, not having seen the movie, maybe, obviously I will watch it. It's on my long list of things to see. What kind of, cinematic things did you try, dramatic things did you try to kind of make it feel more real? So it's not like, the stereotype of Sybil, with 10 personalities, or just the stereotype of mental health and mental illness in pop culture, like I said, becomes a caricature. How do you keep that well grounded in your pictures?
It's tough because I love drama movies. I love them. And, a lot of times there are tropes and cliches you can fall back on that are effective and they work for a reason. But I think a lot of times with this movie, especially, I mean, the reason was because we just didn't see a lot of these depictions as super realistic. Like, I mean, yes, people break down, people cry, people have bad days, but more often than not, it's this like low lingering thing that just kind of is there. And I think what it looks like, cinematically, there's this great shot that I love. It's one of my favorite shots in the film. And it's where, he's kind of at his lowest point, and he's eating these cheese balls. Like, these cheese balls are just, those little terrible ones that come in the big bucket.
Right.
And he's like eating them throughout the film. And
you have to be really depressed to be eating those off-brand cheese balls.
and the panda is eating them too, because the panda's kind of like his psyche. So, he's just thinking about this thing. But like, to him, that's his little dopamine hit for whatever moment he's finding himself in. And there's, this shot of him just like sitting on the couch with this like empty bucket of cheese balls right by his head. And he's just like grabbing one, and he's looked at it, and he looks like he doesn't even want to eat it, but he eats it anyway. And it's just kind of that weird cycle you get in just to kind of feel something or feel better, even for like 2 seconds, and it is that low grade, I think, lingering type of, dealing with a thing that more people will connect to than the violin, if you will.
Right. Are you happy with your depiction of mental health in the film? Has anyone come up and said, wait, that's not realistic, that doesn't make any sense? Or said otherwise, hey, thanks for doing it that way.
Yeah.
It really spoke to me. Like, do you feel like you got it across the way you wanted it to be?
I do. I think, there's always room for improvement, but I do think, my last film, Son of Clowns, also dealt with depression in a slightly different way through like substances and stuff. But this was a little more, I would almost call it like universal, just because I think this is something everyone can and probably will go through at some point in their life in some, way, shape, or form. And I think it was just showing that the world still goes on, like, whether you want it to or not. And it's like, how do you find your place in that world when you kind of don't feel, you feel like an alien? Like, you feel like this world that you've been living in this whole time doesn't even really feel like itself anymore. You feel like you've like moved planets or something. And, kind of how do you cope and continue and go to work and show up? There's another scene in the film where his friends keep calling him, and he's like sitting in playing this video game, and he's just kind of like zoning out and disassociating, and his friends keep calling them. And eventually he picks up and he's like eating the cheese balls, but he's like faking throwing up. And he's like, I'm so sick, man. And he's got his mouth full of these cheese balls. He's like, I can't make it. I'm so sorry. I know I said I'd be there. I'll catch you next time. Acting like he's going to throw up. And then he hangs up the phone and just keeps eating the cheese balls and playing the game. And I just kind of lingered on that shot for a while, just so you could really like get in his head. And it's just these weird little moments that, again, you're not always going to be the best friend. You're not always going to be the best whatever when you're going through something like that. So I think it was just important to show, the highs and the lows. So
sure. That's great. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's for me, especially, it's in those banal moments.
Yeah.
That the real truth can be, especially now I get phone calls from friends that are having a hard time with what's going on, but I'm having a really hard time too. And I feel like an awful friend because I don't want to speak to you sometimes because 100%. I need to take care of myself. And it all just kind of, starts looping around on itself. But that leads me to my next question a little bit too is, so while you're editing the movie, you said you were editing it this June while the pandemic was happening and all of that. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you were affected? I'm sure you had a different plan for this movie in March than you did in June. Talk to me a little bit about how the plans kind of got disrupted by the pandemic, how you're reacting to it, just everything that you've kind of been doing to try to, keep the project on track in this totally different world that seems to be affecting us all very deeply.
Yeah. At first, it was almost like just pretending. I mean, like we all did. We were like, oh, this isn't going to last past the summer.
Right.
It was that kind of like disassociation. But to be fair, like no one really knew at the same time. So, I can't blame that on, anything really. It was just how we all kind of acted. But after, the summer, I was like, okay, I think this is going to be a thing for a while. And, at that point, we had entered some film festivals, and at the time, when we entered them, we were under the assumption they were going to happen. We didn't think it was going to last this long. And then obviously more and more kept going online, and, now every festival is online. And so we did a few film festivals that way. I still have not shown this film to a live audience, and that stings a little because I do think this film would hit different live, and I'm sure one day we'll get there. And I've joked about this because we did this like podcast for the film that we talked about, each episode was like a different cast or crew member, and I was always joking with them. I was like, we're gonna have our premiere one day, cast and crew. We'll figure it out. And
rent a drive-through, or a drive-in. It's all about drive-ins now,
it is. So one way or another, I think we'll figure it out, but I'm not in a huge rush right now, just because I think everyone's online for better or worse. So I felt like I need to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't want to pretend this isn't happening and just, because part of me was like, what if I just sit on the film for a year? What if I sit on it until the world goes back to normal? But the problem is I don't know when that's going to be. And I also just feel very passionately about doing this right now. And I think right now the message actually is a little more important than it would be later. I mean, I think it would always be important, but I do think because of everyone being cut off and disconnected and isolated, there is probably more depression and just people dealing with things in their own way. And it's these little things, it's that sense that this is not normal, but I don't know what to do about it.
Right.
So
right.
I think that's a lot of what the film deals with. And the film doesn't really answer that per se. I think it just shows that you're not alone. And that's Camus. He's an actual rapper in real life. This was his acting debut, and he wrote this song called You're Not Alone. And, the film, in the character version of himself in the film, he's trying to write that song while dealing with all this grief and depression. And, I think that's just the ultimate message of the movie. It's just realizing that. And it sounds cliche and cheesy, but I think when you watch the film and you see the light come on in his head, just for that very simple realization, I think it will connect. And, again, it's not a mind-blowing or earth-shattering message. It's not saying this is the how-to guide of depression. Right. I think it's just talking a lot about like being real with yourself and doing something about when something's off. Sure. That's outstanding. That's what we like to hear, is like, if you feel like there's a problem, I've said it before. I said it during this show. I've said it in other shows. I say it in my tweets. I say it when I'm online. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you feel like you need to speak to someone, especially right now, as messed up as the world is. I think it's kind of shown a brighter light on their own individual struggles and trying to get through this time and being isolated and things like that. So I've always been a huge proponent of talking to someone, whether it be with a therapist or just picking up the phone and calling a friend or just texting a friend. Like I said, sometimes I'm not always the best friend to someone, but I want to always try to be a better person and be a better listener and a better human. And it sounds like the movie is going to be, hopefully can be that to some people. Let me ask you one or two more questions before we let you go. Let me ask you about releasing the movie on Amazon. And so again, everyone, if you want to look up the movie Panda Bear, it's on Amazon Prime right now. Because Amazon for filmmakers is a self-serve platform. Anybody can go out and take their phone and their camera and go shoot a movie and put it up on Amazon. Did you, and maybe this changed a little bit as the pandemic was happening, did you always plan on putting it only on Amazon? Was it going to go somewhere else? Did you take it to any, sales reps or anything like that? Or did you want to keep it all in-house, if you will, and like control all of that yourself? I think, again, it was like that necessity when everything was happening. I felt like, yes, there were maybe other options, other platforms, but for the time being, it felt like the most immediate, sure thing. And, I know that sounds bad. It's like, in a way, it was like refreshing to know that like a sure thing was possible. Right. And if that you want people to see it, it can go there. They don't really reject movies. Yeah. Like you can put it on there and it'll be there, and there it is. I think they'll take it as long as it's not you filming your cat. And maybe even then they would as long as it's not like a TikTok dance or something. Generally speaking, you can kind of put it up on there. But I just always, again, when the movie came out a couple of weeks ago now, the thing that fascinated me, we talked about it a little bit earlier, that dichotomy to me of like, for me, it would be very, very stress relieving
to know that I can control putting it on. I'll QC the ProRes file myself. I'll upload it to Amazon myself. I'll put the subtitles up there myself, and I control. If there's a mistake, it's on me, and I'm going to do it. And that's a stress reliever for me personally. Like, I like to be the one that has my hands on that technical stuff to deliver it. But now you're opening yourself up to, maybe not you, but for me, the stress of logging into the Amazon dashboard and seeing just how little money you're actually going to get from it. So I asked the question because, again, like, it's very empowering, almost stress relieving to have that control. But then you see you want this to eventually be a career. And Amazon is not going to be paying those revenues are not going to be paying your mortgage this month. So, talk to me again a little bit just about when you made that decision. Do you plan on monetizing it elsewhere eventually, or are you just going to move on to the next thing? Like, what's the next move for Panda Barrett? And then what's the next move for you afterwards? Yeah.
Regarding Panda Barrett, I think I'm going to try and take my time with it a little more than I would releasing a normal film. Obviously we're still in that like first month of release. It just came out in October 4th. So, it still hasn't even been a month as of this recording. Even as you get past that month, you kind of see stuff dwindle off a little bit. And then you start really having to think more creatively, more long-term. And that's what I'm doing. It's running ads. It's going on more podcasts. It's really finding the niche for this specific topic. It does have that weird panda bear. I mean, the film is about a rapper dealing with grief, and he sees this panda bear in a mascot costume that no one else can see. So, we can play up that surrealistic element too, and kind of connect with people there. Because I think there might be people out there who don't know they could, watch this film and connect with their mental health, who may just turn it on because they see rapper and imaginary friend panda bear. And, maybe that's the weird, the gimmick, kind of like I talked about with the music video, that kind of gets them hooked to kind of then talk about a more serious topic. I did the same thing with my first movie, Son of Clowns, with these clowns in a circus that kind of, lure you in a little bit, and you're like, what's that? And then it's actually a deeper topic. So I think, it's like finding those ways to talk about that. And, obviously I'm game to put this on plenty more platforms, should they have us. And, I'm kind of investigating and looking into that right now. And I'd love to get this thing, out there even further, especially internationally, just because I think that, Amazon is great, but it does kind of limit you a little bit regionally. Right. So I'd love to find ways to, get it out there more broadly too.
Sure. I mean, you're going to be if it costs a couple of $100, you're going to be in profit pretty quickly, no matter where it is. So again, that's one of the stress relievers of it. Yeah. And that kind of leads me into my last question before I let you go, because I love to, you are married, correct? Right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the things I love at talking to married filmmakers about, because I kind of self-funded, at least we had a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo, but I did plenty of self-funding on my documentary. Yeah. And my wife has been absolutely 1000% crystal clear in saying, we're not paying for your next movie. Like, that's just not going to happen. Talk to me a little bit about working with your wife and how she has embraced the true indie spirit of paying for your own stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm very fortunate, that she's super supportive. She also comes from theater, so she's an artist herself, and she
gets it.
She gets it, yes. So I think that helps a lot. Like, I just kind of come back to, like, I was raised super frugally. Mm-hmm. Like, I would hate to throw away food, like, just things like that. I mean, which makes sense, but I kind of get that honestly from my upbringing. So I think anytime I make a film, I don't bet the house, I don't do anything crazy. I try to keep everything very reasonable. I don't really spend a lot of money. I don't take a billion trips. I think a lot of times, like, what a lot of other folks might put into their wood carving hobby or this hobby, I kind of put that into film, if you will. And, I think, again, I keep it reasonable. I'm not looking for lasers, aliens, CGI, and explosions. Right. I keep it very practical, things I can film for free or cheap. And that seemed to be working well. So, I can't say it's, a surefire thing, but, for the time being, it seems to be working out.
Right. While it works, do it. And then eventually,
don't fix it. Yes,
when there's some kids in the house and there are college funds to save up for, we'll deal with it then. But right now, can I just have $100 to buy like 8 pizzas for all these people helping me out?
Yeah. Well, and in a way, I kind of like disguise it. Like, a lot of my friends are also actors, they crew, things like that. Not everyone. And honestly, even the ones who aren't, I will rope them in. I'll be like, don't you want to hold a boom pole and get some people and hang out? So like, a lot of times I'll kind of like double dip, and it'll be like an excuse to hang out with people too. Like, let's make this film,
Absolutely.
And obviously the real reason is to make the film, but there is that camaraderie you get too on the film set. So I think, it's just being strategic with it in a way. So.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you this again, as someone who's been doing that for a long time, do it now while you can, because eventually the pizzas will not work. All of my friends they're all in there. We're all in our mid 40s. A lot of them are married with kids and have jobs. Like, you guys want to come out and shoot them? Like, no, we did that 10 years ago, man. Like, I'm too old to like wake up at 7 a.m. So as long as you can do it, I say, hey, by all means, go for it. But I'm, like I said, I was always curious because my wife is not, she's a realtor. She's not in the entertainment industry. So like the numbers, like, so like when we're asking people for money for movies, when she has people that she works with and we're like, hey, like, can you help out with this movie? They're like, what's wrong with are you out of work? Do you need help? Do you not have them? They don't realize that that's what movie making is. Like, we don't want to be spending our own money.
Right.
Please, give and help and contribute. Like, what are you out of work? Are you, do you need help? Do you need food? Like, no, it's a different thing. So, but if your wife is coming from theater and you have a bit of a, foundation for what fundraising is all about, you can kind of have a different point of view about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Evan Kidd, thank you so much for joining us. Again, the movie is Panda Barrett. I know we were talking about Amazon this whole time, but tell me again where the movie can be found and, a little bit, again, what's coming up next and where the movie is and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This has been great. Yeah, the movie is Panda Barrett. It is on Amazon Prime Video. You can watch it there, stream it, rent it, however you want to do it.
And it's free for Prime members now?
It's free for Prime members, yeah. So,
and if you don't have Prime, you can rent it.
You can. I was going to say, if you're ordering things for quarantine, you're probably set to stream Panda.
There you go. So yeah, check it out on Amazon, Panda Barrett. Again, Evan Kidd, thank you so much for joining us on Head Above Water. It was great talking to you, and we'll check out Panda Barrett on Amazon, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck with it and the best of luck in the future, and hopefully we'll have you on again real soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate this. And thanks for what you're doing for the topic of mental health. I really do appreciate it.
It's my plan. Any little bit that we can, help people out. We're all filmmakers here. The show's for filmmakers. It's for micro budget, smaller guys that finance our own stuff and have to deal with all of the different struggles and roadblocks that come up involved with that. So as long as we can all keep telling each other our personal stories, know that we're not alone, know that we can all get through this together, we can all be successful. There's plenty of pie out there for everyone, and I hope you get a nice big piece of that Amazon pie. Again, Evan Kidd, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks a lot. Take care.